Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jai Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jai Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, 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 Nitya Gaura Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki, Shri Giraj Govardhan Hari ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Nitai Gaur Premanandi. So again, Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. So we are going to be discussing Srila Prabhupada's wonderful pastimes. I pray for the blessings of our spiritual masters and all your blessings as well. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadam Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shamate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Sinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, the chapter that we're discussing today is based in France. Srila Prabhupada is there recuperating, and sorry, I'm just pulling up the chapter. So it begins on August the 2nd, and the first reports that Srila Prabhupada is getting is about some challenges with the devotees who are serving in Germany. There's a party that's going to India, and they're sort of helping themselves to all of the resources there. So this has some relevance in the next part of the chapter, where Srila Prabhupada is discussing with his disciples the allegations that are being made against devotees of ISKCON in India, that they're actually a front for the CIA. So Srila Prabhupada, he considers that with derision, obviously, because he says there are so many other devotees that are serving in India now, like this German party is going to be joining. Are they also working for the CIA? And then what's also of interest is that Srila Prabhupada mentions Russian and Polish devotees. So the reason that's interesting is because at the time, there weren't really any Russian and Polish devotees in India. In fact, there weren't many Russian and Polish devotees at all. When Prabhupada traveled to Russia, he made about one devotee, and because of all the challenges at the time, the Cold War, communism, the Iron Curtain, KGB, it was very difficult for Krishna consciousness to spread. Yet now we see that probably, I think, out of all foreign devotees, Russian, Eastern European devotees make up the most who reside in India, I think. So one could say, well, Prabhupada mentioned them from the point of the KGB. They're probably the same as, in terms of being a threat as the CIA, but we could say that Prabhupada had a lot of British disciples, and MI6 is quite formidable as well. So Prabhupada's vision, though, was that his literature, he said, the Russians have imperceptibly joined, they have praised my books. Because of the influence of his literature, all these, there would be basically the spread of Krishna consciousness like wildfire. Right? He was presaging this future where so many of these devotees from Russian and Eastern European countries would be residing in India as they do today. That was his transcendental vision, because he understood the impact of his books. And in comparison, he says that other literature is useless, he says. He says there may be some truth, right? Some truth. Even if we're talking about science or astronomy. He says when a child speaks, there is some truth. When a child speaks to his parents, there is some truth, otherwise where is the question of talking? But when they talk of big, big things, he means both children and scientists. Like they're going to Mars and scratching sand there. That we don't believe. When they talk of this tape recorder, some electronic machine, this mic or the laptop, joining together and it is working, that much you can take. So Srila Prabhupada, he's instructing us that we're not fundamentalists. Like, we don't live in a hole somewhere without technology. We utilize it as far as we can in the Lord's service. And in that case, there is some truth to science. But when science contradicts, not Prabhupada, that he will make clear, when science contradicts Vedic scriptures, our Shastra and our previous acharyas, then we don't agree. And that includes theories like evolution, the moon landing, and of course the idea that Mars could be colonized. When you speak of so many things, that millions of years there were germs and germination, and now they're trying to come out, and it is all vacant. These are all bogus. We don't accept. Talking too much. In Bengal it is called yatam. When the child speaks something too much, he's indicating, you'll tell the child, stop. To the extent of his capacity, what the child can understand and what the child can speak about properly, that's all right. But if you talk more than that, you're a rascal. Because they have some electronic success or they have manufactured some jet plane, they are now thinking, we have owned over the whole world situation. That is nonsense. And so far we are concerned, we don't talk anything except what is mentioned in the books. We simply talk what is mentioned by Vyasadeva, by Shukadev Goswami. Srila Prabhupada is making it clear, it's not from a standpoint of personal ego that he's speaking, but because whatever the scientists are claiming is against what scripture says. Right? Krishna clearly states in Bhagavad Gita that we're all struggling with our six senses and the mind. Nobody's dominating nature. He says that this material nature that's working under his instruction, it's very difficult to overcome. And that's what we find, that even after so many years since Prabhupada spoke these words, and so many advances in technology, nobody is in control of material nature. The basic things that we need for life, the sun to rise every day, rainfall, the air circulation and so many other things, we don't control any of that. We don't come close, right, for all the technology. We're also fairly helpless against any of these things malfunctioning, or against, of course, natural disasters, disease outbreaks. Something comes to mind for all of us. And it means that we basically don't have any control over this nature. We don't have any control over space either, since, again, Srila Prabhupada spoke these words. There hasn't been much advancement in the moon project, so now they've turned their attention to Mars, but they actually haven't even sent anyone there. There haven't been any manned missions yet. They're planning a lot of things, but they actually don't have an environment that they can work in there yet. Nor do they have control over their own body, mind, and senses. And that's actually a very significant point in the talk today, especially with the next paragraph. So the children were making a noise downstairs, and Srila Prabhupada reflected that the sex impulse is so strong that people willingly accept the great consequential burden of raising children rather than give it up. And this incident elicited other observations from him, like he mentioned, he said that even though there's so much of trouble, people understand that there will be some burden, he calls it. We may call it a burden of love, that's fair enough, but there will be some significant consequences out of sex, still the living entities fall into that trap. He says it's the pleasure of itching. Everyone knows that I may enjoy sex pleasure now and the after effect will be very bad, but they can't tolerate the itching. They do it again and again because they haven't been trained up. They become victimized and the after effect is very bad, illicit or not illicit. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that whether within marriage or without, still there is so much consequence to sex, but yet at the same time people can't stop their tendencies. They know it, the modern civilization. They have adopted the means of killing. So, of course, we know one method, abortion, but there is another method that Srila Prabhupada mentions, which is also quite horrific. First of all, they try to stop pregnancy by contraceptive method, and still, if it is not stopped, then kill. If he's stillborn, then again they put up in a box and go away. And when the obnoxious smell comes, they open it and they find it. So this is a phenomenon it was occurring a lot in Japan, where because of so many social stigmas and so on, women were putting either their stillborn children or even live children that they couldn't take care of into lockers, like those lockers that you might get in an airport or in gymnasiums and so on, and just locking the children away there until they were found at whatever point. So they have, of course, put some measures into place to control that kind of thing, but it has been happening recently, even last few years. And this all comes from a society that essentially does not teach us to control our pleasures, what we want to enjoy, and puts us, me, mine, and I, at the center of everything. And if someone or something gets in the way of what I want, then I'll do whatever I need to get rid of them. So this is, again, it sounds quite horrific, and therefore the control measure by the Supreme Lord is nature. Nature is not designed to revolve around us and what we want. So there's always some consequence to when we try to abuse the privilege. Nature teaches us about responsibility over desire, over what we want. So in spiritual life, there's a minimum of regulations that actually just bring us to the level of civility. It doesn't actually make us spiritual, it just makes us civil. And that we have to promise that we will not engage in meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. And one thing that's interesting to consider here is that out of the 4, gambling, meat eating, and intoxication are completely out. But if one is regulated with sex, then one can engage in that, although the responsibility, children, that still remains. This Srila Prabhupada will talk about next. These are happening, but when you talk of that, you learn how to become brahmachari, then they will refuse. The after effect is very, very bad. Either you get legally or illegally. So, we don't want to say the children are bad, but there's a lot of responsibility that comes with raising children, and the concern with that from a scriptural perspective, and not again from a personal perspective at all, is that anyone who has or gets engaged in family life becomes entangled in many, many, many karmic consequences. That's the bottom line. So scripture calls these consequences or describes these consequences like a dark well. And once one gets trapped in it, it's very hard to actually get out. And it's basically how everyone gets entangled in transmigration, and that's why it's considered bad. There's nothing personally against children. Legally, we have to raise the children very nicely. Otherwise, unwanted children create so much trouble. You have to take care. We say, never mind, you have got children, give them proper education, make them devotees, make their life successful. We cannot say that you kill them. That we cannot say, that is not possible. We welcome. But we must be well organized to utilize these poor souls for becoming first-class devotees. This is the way that we break the cycle of birth and death for everyone, for the child and for the parents. Otherwise, sex life and the byproduct, that is always troublesome. Either you take it this way or that way. If it's not troublesome, then why are they killing their own children? To avoid trouble. So that's quite clear. This is psychology. But our process is, if you want to avoid trouble, then don't marry, remain brahmachari. If you cannot, then all right, have legal wife, get children, and raise them very nicely. Make them Vaishnavas. Take the responsibility. So this is the solution to this trouble. And Srila Prabhupada then explains to the devotees how that is taken care of within the spiritual society. So we are organizing this society, we welcome. Some way or other we shall arrange for shelter, right, for the children, for families. But to take care of the children, to educate them, that will depend on their parents. So again, you desire to have children, but the responsibility must be there. Right? The society will create a nice environment, but the responsibility relies on the parents. Like scripture says, one should not become father, mother, spiritual master, husband, if one cannot take care of the dependents. So that in future there will not be a batch of unwanted children. We can welcome hundreds and thousands of children. There is no question of economic problem. We know that. He repeated what he had told Jyotirmaya the other day, that children should be trained from the very beginning how to be devotees. They should be trained up how to take bath, how to chant Hare Krishna or some Vedic mantra, go to the temple, offer obeisance, prayer, then take their lunch. In this way, they should be always engaged, then they'll be trained up. Simple thing. We don't want to train them as big grammarians. That anyone, if he's got some inclination, right, that means if the child has some tendency towards studying, then he can do it personally, there's no harm. But the important thing Prabhupada wants is that the general training must be there for one to be a devotee, a pure devotee of Krishna. Otherwise, Jyotirmaya was suggesting the biology. What will they do with biology? Simply let them be convinced that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is our duty to serve him. So now this statement could be taken controversially, that Srila Prabhupada is advocating that the children are just simpletons and insufficiently educated. Right? In the material world, someone who is insufficiently educated is generally someone who can be manipulated. But that's not what Srila Prabhupada wants. Actually, if you look at society today, even though children may be extremely educated, they are manipulated. They're manipulated by every influence or influencer out there. They're slaves to their senses. Right? They rarely question what the tongue wants to eat, what the eyes want to see, what the ears want to hear. Right? Whatever their sense desire at the time is that they want, they will just pursue. They don't question what's good for them or not. They're generally blind followers to whatever trend is going on. And they're chasing after anything and everything in the consumer culture. At most, though, they're not even coming out happy after all these pursuits. They're just less bored than they were before. Right? Because that's what most children want to do, not be bored. So sometimes that quest may drive them to do something very dangerous, disturbing, harmful to themselves. Right? The mass killings come to mind, drug abuse, which is rampant all over the world. Or in the long term, they destroy themselves with stress eating or other habits that come up because they can't cope with the pressures of life. Right? So that's essentially what we are producing with our education system. They have the same goal, like we were speaking earlier on, to just put themselves first above others, even if it's above their own family members. Right? So even educated people abandon their kids. Even educated kids abandon their parents in their old age. All kinds of other abandonment in between. And that's when they're being kind. Right? Otherwise, there's so much of familial violence, right? So much, so many domestic issues. And we may ask, well, why would someone turn on their family member? Why would they be so harmful to someone they love? Surely, we think before we do something. Shri Shri Radhanath ki, Shri Lagi Govardhan Hari ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Shri Prabhupada ki. So we would wonder that, surely people think before they act, but we said in the beginning, nobody's trained to think, nobody's trained to question, and we accept whatever's poured into our eyes, ears, and so on by media, and we never become masters of ourselves, to make our own minds up, to question things in the correct way, to develop Atmana, deliberate spiritual intelligence. That is what Srila Prabhupada wants. That's what Krishna wants. Krishna didn't want us to become mindless robots. He says in the Bhagavad Gita that if you want to control all these impulses that lead you down these terrible paths, you develop deliberate spiritual intelligence. So that intelligence doesn't mean you become a conspiracy theorist. Right? That's a whole other kind of material consciousness. It's very, very material. We want to develop spiritual consciousness. Srila Prabhupada wants discerning, mature, truly spiritual children who have gone beyond all of these material impulses and become, like Krishna describes in the 18th chapter, purified by intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred. One who lives in a secluded place, or who can live in a secluded place happily, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in the trance-year's meditation, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. Who wouldn't want a child like that? Who wouldn't approve of a spiritual or an education system that produces a child like that? That's what we want. So, on the other hand, we can also understand that such a person, such an advanced person, will have knowledge of everything, including material subjects. So Srila Prabhupada says if a child is inclined to science, inclined to grammar or anything else, then they'll also learn it because they are completely under the shelter of Krishna, and he's guiding them from within with all the knowledge that they need to succeed in whatever he wants them to succeed in, whether it's a boardroom, whether it's a laboratory, or whether it's the temple. So there's nothing negative in this system, this kind of system of education. Becoming Krishna's servant means that we avoid becoming a material slave. So even though we don't exactly have that system of education as in a Gurukul today, but we have to make sure that along with the material subjects, kids have to do the biology and other things. We make sure that they have the spiritual training to produce the kind of self-realized persons that Krishna described. So then Srila Prabhupada gives them advice about developing facilities for training devotees in this way. And Harikesh pointed out that the Schloss Rettershof in Germany, that's the center that they have in Germany, has no land. It's no land for a facility to educate children. But Prabhupada still endorsed it because he said the building is very nice. I said, so the author is speaking, I said we don't own the building. Prabhupada dismissed this as unimportant, giving his transcendental perspective. Never mind, own or not own. You possess, and that's all. You don't own anything, everything belongs to Krishna. Do you think you own this? So long he likes, we shall remain, that's all. I know that if Krishna says, go away, we shall go away. Why so much legal implication? Everywhere, although we have got big, big buildings, I don't think we own it. It is Krishna's. Why should you stress on the proprietorship? So, just like in that verse translation that we read from Bhagavad Gita, we should be free from all sense of false proprietorship, thinking that anything in this world belongs to us. We didn't create the earth, water, fire, air, and ether that made it up. And Srila Prabhupada is saying that even if you bought this property, if you bought this land, it still wouldn't belong to you. It still wouldn't belong to ISKCON. Everything is Krishna's. When he tells us to stay, we stay. And when he wants us to go, then we go. That's the pure devotee's understanding. Harikesh brought in a salad he had made from last night's garden produce for Srila Prabhupada to snack on. Then Srila Prabhupada glorified the simple, self-sufficient life, criticizing the artificial time and money-wasting scientific civilization. Better give this fresh fruit, anything fresh that is full of vitamin. Grow fresh, take fresh. In India, there is no system to produce 300 years old bread in the market and eat. It must be freshly made. So Srila Prabhupada is speaking about the sophisticated aged foods, right? Cheeses and other things that are matured for a very long time. And he says that none of this is actually going to do any good for the body. We remember from Bhagavad Gita that foods that are cooked more than 3 hours before and consumed, it's in the mode of ignorance. So again, ignorance will just produce more members of society who are ignorant. Even if it does seem sophisticated, better is the simple traditional life of preparing dishes freshly for the family. And that's illuminating. The simplicity belies the actual state of knowledge that results from eating fresh food, even if prepared simply and of course offered to the Supreme Lord, as the Lord's own mother did. No servant, mother personally, wife personally, meaning that even though they were servants, the Lord's mother served him, wife served him. Bhagavan recalls that in the Krishna book, although there were so many servants in the palace, Rukmini chose to fan the Lord personally. So Prabhupada says, yes, still in Indian family system, when the husband comes from office, the wife takes care immediately. Then Srila Prabhupada comments on some other aspects of Indian culture, that on his plate were tomatoes. He said that that was introduced into agriculture. Right? It didn't grow indigenously in India. In our childhood, these tomatoes were called foreign eggplant. And because it was foreign, nobody will touch it. And he also says that no one would wear imported milk cloth. No religious function would allow it. And as far as medicine is concerned, they would never touch it. So when we might say, well, Srila Prabhupada had said before that we can use products of civilization, science, and so on. Of course, Vedic civilization is civilized. But modern civilization, we can use those products. So there's nothing wrong per se now with using tomatoes and other things. But at the time that Srila Prabhupada and his family were not using the tomatoes and the milk cloth, they had better alternatives. They had the original things. They had the better situation. Right? And if we have that, if we can live more simply, if we can live more in the mode of goodness, then we should. Right? When we're living in the society that we do now, where unfortunately we can't, then we accept that alternative and use it in Krishna service. Right? That's as much as we can do. But we definitely aren't fanatical or fundamentalist. He described how the official British policy was based on the premise that if the Indians remained in their own culture, they could not rule them successfully. Right? So the way the British succeeded in subjugating in India was by destroying the culture. They introduced all this nonsense, drinking tea, drinking wine. They were as if saying to the Indians, you are uncivilized. And whatever the British are doing, they are civilized. And they were given facilities, right? Those Indian people who were English educated, they were given more facilities, obviously to encourage that they imbibed more of the British culture and gave up more of their own. In this way, they first of all tried to make the whole Indian population anglicized. It was not possible to make everyone, but those who were Indian educated, they took it seriously, and in this way Indian culture was killed, on top of the fact that the British took a lot of wealth out of India. So Indians became poverty-stricken and culturally conquered. He laughed as he described the contents of a book called English Etiquette. Very big book. How to sit, how to laugh, how to smile, how to pass water, how to this. So the irony is that these books may teach someone how to behave on the outside, how to follow all these kinds of etiquette. But on the inside, we have persons who can't control their minds and senses, can't follow the basic four principles of civilization. And this was inherent in Indian culture, that they could avoid intoxication, gambling, illicit sex, meat eating. like Srila Prabhupada said, even at the time that he was leaving for the West, these things were still not so widespread. So, on the other hand, when British people were, before Srila Prabhupada went to the West, being preached to, and they were asked to follow these rules, they couldn't. Right? So, following all these etiquettes on the outside, it doesn't mean that anyone is actually civilized. Right? One must be able to control the mind and the senses. So then Srila Prabhupada went out for an evening walk at 6 p.m. Many devotees were coming to join him from different parts of Europe. And his bhajan, his singing, was being broadcast on the loudspeaker. So he listened, Prabhupada listened for a moment. Then smiling, he said objectively, Narottam Das has said that this voice does not belong to the universe. So even though he's speaking in terms of that line from Narottam Das Thakur's bhajan, I think it's Hari Hari Bipale, Janama Goinu. That line says, Golakera Prema Dhanan Harinama Sankirtan. There's a lot of truth in Srila Prabhupada's statement that it's his voice as well that doesn't come from this universe. Right? His singing particularly is from Goloka. Prabhupada signaled the devotees to join him on the grass and spoke for 10 minutes on Bhagavad Gita 9:34, one of his most oft-quoted verses. He repeatedly asked what was difficult about becoming Krishna conscious and thinking of Krishna. We think of something always, 24 hours, that's the mind's nature. So you don't have to kick the mind into gear to think, it's always thinking, so just think of Krishna. Then your life becomes successful. And worship Krishna means even if you can't do anything, you simply go and offer your obeisances. That's enough for worship. Right? It doesn't mean that you have to actually do the pujas. And Srila Prabhupada then said that there's no restriction on who can do it, anyone, anywhere, from any background, any part of the world. So he asked the devotees repeatedly, what's the difficulty then? One of the devotees suggested that too much attachment to material enjoyment could be a difficulty, and Srila Prabhupada agrees that it cannot give us satisfaction. He said that happiness means love, but love of family, country, or society, right? All the things we try to love, it doesn't bring us happiness. We are becoming frustrated. Therefore, the real lovable object is Krishna. If you make progress to that point, then you'll be happy. That's the highest perfection of life. And again he asked, what's the difficulty? So another devotee says, what if one is envious of Krishna? Then Prabhupada says, if you're envious, there's no question of love. Right? You can't love anybody if you're envious. But he asks again, what's the difficulty in loving Krishna? So many devotees actually said, there's no difficulty. And then Srila Prabhupada says, yes, if you don't want to love someone, right? If you don't want to love someone, then there's no question of trying to engage in some process. But if you know by loving someone you'll be happy, then you'll find the process. And the process is very easy and open to everyone. So we can understand that from the material world. If we want to love someone or want to develop a relationship with someone, we get to know them. Right? Getting to know them is the same process in Krishna consciousness. We get to know Krishna through the scriptures, through the spiritual master, through the sadhus, through realization. Right? And this is how the love will develop. It's an easy process. There's no difficulty in it. Another devotee said that sometimes someone may want to love Krishna, but being able to remain steady, they fall down. And Prabhupada says, no, they want to love Krishna, but they divert their love to other things. So that happens. So that's the difficulty. If you want to love Krishna, then follow this. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. You're worshipping deity, but you are thinking of loving some woman. That's all. Huh? Why are you diverting? And if you love Krishna, you're engaged in his service, just decorate nicely, right, the Lord's form. Why do you divert your attention to anything else? That means that I'm not yet convinced by loving Krishna that I'll be perfect. That's the difficulty. So the difficulty is not in the process, the difficulty is with us. Otherwise it's simple. Prabhupada presented another possible objection. The question may be raised that if I want to love Krishna, then how will other things go on? Right? Krishna never says that you have to go to the factory, earn money, and then you can love me. So a practical person will ask, or will say, if I think of Krishna always, then from where will the money come? So Bhagavan had the answer. Krishna says, Yoga Kshemam Vahami Aham. Prabhupada's eyes lit up. Find out this verse. Right? So from the Bhagavad Gita, but those who worship me with devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and preserve what they have. The same thing Prabhupada says. The meditation, right, from that verse 934. Manmana bhava mad bhakto Always think of Krishna, worshipping Krishna, and those who are engaged in this way, Krishna says, Yogakshemam Vahami Aham, I will supply everything they need. My point is here in this new Mayapur, at this farm in France that they're living in, if you carry on Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto, you just serve Krishna, worship Krishna, think of Krishna, then all your necessities will come automatically. Sufficient food, milk, fruits, flowers, all necessities will be supplied. So the note of caution though is that we don't become lazy and we think that if we sit around and do nothing, Krishna will just supply everything. There is still that manmana bhava mad bhakto. You have to think of Krishna. You have to develop your love for him by getting to know him. You have to understand scripture, hear about scripture. You have to worship him, even if it's just offering obeisances. So there's always activity on our part, right? But directed towards Krishna. And because of our sincerity, he will supply everything. That's how it works. No one sits around doing nothing and expects Krishna to serve them. Yogeshwar wondered how much effort someone should make for his own personal progress. Srila Prabhupada again emphasizes, there is no personal endeavor. You don't have to do anything separately. So it's just like the animals. They're just dependent on you. If you cut the throat, the animal will just accept it. So you just fully surrender to Krishna and he'll give you the protection. Manmana bhava mad bhakto, and other things will be done. Krishna says, Yogakshemam Vahami Aham. Someone wanted to know if, when a person falls down from the path of devotional service, does it mean that he did not want to love Krishna? And Prabhupada's answer was short and to the point. Yes. Another devotee asked whether a person engaged in a service that involves business could be considered to be thinking of Krishna. Prabhupada's answer was positive. Yes, if he's doing for Krishna, he must always be thinking of Krishna. And this way the business will also be spiritualized. Bhugarba wanted to know how a person full of material desires could develop the desire to love Krishna. Material means that you love more Krishna. Automatically material desires will be finished, right? So that if you have those material desires and you work more on loving Krishna, then your material desires will go away. Again, you don't have to make a separate effort to get rid of those material desires. Because you do not love Krishna 10%, therefore you have material desires. The balance is filled up by material desires. So he gives an example. If you have a glass and you have some ink, but you keep filling it with water, eventually the ink will get diluted and you won't see it anymore, and the water will be clear. So in the same way, if we sincerely desire to serve Krishna, not that we say our material desires are for Krishna, but if we really desire to serve Krishna and we fill ourselves up with those kinds of desires, then our material desires will be diluted until they don't exist anymore. So you love Krishna 24 hours a day, 10%, and thinking of Krishna, offering obeisances, worshipping, there's no possibility of material desires. So he emphasizes again that Krishna will supply everything, and we question it actually just because we don't know Krishna and we don't love him. But he will supply. If he's supplying for the non-devotees, and we know that, right? People who are not worshipping Krishna, thinking of Krishna, they're getting everything that they need. He'll certainly supply for the devotee who dedicates himself to Krishna's service. Another devotee inquires about who administers the punishments when someone doesn't serve purely. Is it Krishna or is the person punishing himself? Prabhupada explained that Krishna doesn't have to take any direct action. Under his direction, material nature does the job, right? And that no one can overcome the laws of nature. So this brought Srila Prabhupada back to the scientists. They also can't overcome the laws of nature, that they're trying to. Right? They went to the moon, they didn't succeed there. Prabhupada, he issues a challenge. Live there, go. Right? We see the moon planet, you've got machine, but you cannot go. Right? Because of the laws of nature, it's practical proof. Right? The same way that we can't live underwater. The moon's not an environment for us, neither will Mars be. Prabhupada calls them rascals. Naradama, Maya, Parita, Jnana, and Mudhas. But those are not words that Prabhupada gave. Again, it's not from a personal perspective. Those are words that Krishna has used to describe these persons in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Again, it is scripture. In scripture, Krishna says that these persons are fools and rascals. So Srila Prabhupada said even in 1958, when he wrote the book Easy Journey of Other Planets, he knew that it would be a waste of time to try and go to any other planet in space. We are conditioned to remain in a certain atmosphere and we cannot surpass that. We live on land, the creatures of the sea live in the sea. Right? Who are the rascals trying to overcome the laws of nature? So what we should do is just focus on Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto. Madhyajimam, that will make your life successful. Don't try to overcome the laws of nature, that's not possible. You've been given this land, this planet. Live here, grow your food, chant Hare Krishna and live peacefully. Why should we go to the moon planet? So you may spend billions to appear sophisticated and go to the moon planet, but once again we come back to the point that no one's really civilized and no one really has control over their mind and senses. But if you live simply, it doesn't mean you are simple, it means that you're actually master of yourself and able to control your mind and senses, things that even scientists can't do with billions of dollars or rands. So we should just try to take care of the earth that we have and live simply with controlled desires. So the next question was whether it was possible to force the mind to think of Krishna. Prabhupada initially thought the devotee was asking about one who is forced by the mind. So once again, Prabhupada says that's a rascal. Then Yogeshwar says, though, our attraction for Krishna must be spontaneous. So we're talking about force now. So Prabhupada says, it is spontaneous. Your attraction is spontaneous. The love is already there. It's not a new thing. But we are misplacing that love onto other objects. So if you place your love with Krishna, then you'll be happy. So we can bring the mind under control of Krishna, Yogeshwar said. Of course, it may seem difficult, but Krishna advises Arjuna when he raises the same doubt that is possible by suitable practice and detachment. So Prabhupada says, yes, one who is always under the control of Krishna, he is no more under the control of the mind. Sahavai manaha Krishna padaravindayo. Mind is being controlled. So mind cannot dictate. Those who are under control of Krishna, the mind dictates to him. He is under the control of the mind or senses, that's all. So point is, you fix your mind at the lotus feet of Krishna and Krishna consciousness, you chant Hare Krishna, and so far the necessities of life is concerned, that will come automatically, you'll never be in trouble. So we will state again, it doesn't mean that when you bring your mind under the control of Krishna, you become a robot. The state of knowledge, what to speak of transcendental knowledge, is that you can see everything as it is. So you're actually situated in the greatest clarity of mind possible, right? You're not a blind follower. And to actually be able to bring that mind under your control, that you can see everything as it is, and you have absolute knowledge. There's no self-help teachings, there's no religious processes, there's no psychiatric or psychological help to help you do that. Most people are trying to help you control some kind of function of the mind so that you can become like everyone else and a slave to the senses. So what's the point? Right? So there's no real way that any process actually helps you to rise above the mind and senses. Right? But this spiritual process, that helps you to do that. So the natural setting coupled with Srila Prabhupada's spontaneity and openness made it a lively, soul-satisfying exchange. The devotees relished this, and Prabhupada himself seemed to gain strength and inspiration from being with his disciples. So it is perfect reciprocation. So later in the evening, Prabhupada again spoke about how it's important, the role of food and its preparation in self-sufficient living. He described how to make simple puffed rice. Right? He said it was very good food. When I told him the devotees make popcorn, he said that it was not very digestive. Puffed rice, however, is very light. In the morning, you can give them this puffed rice, then fruits and milk. Very good breakfast. I mean to say, all self-dependent, right? Easy to produce. So His Grace Ramanuja Acharya Prabhu told me, kindly shared some memoirs of Srila Prabhupada in South Africa, and this is what Prabhu would make for Srila Prabhupada for breakfast: puffed rice and fruits, sorry. Yes, we should save time as much as for this purpose. Right? So you live simply, you eat simply, and with the time you have, you chant, you discuss grantha, right? That's the books, the scripture. Not for any personal so-called comforts, which are not pleasing anyone anyway. We can sit anywhere on the grass here, and whatever available, we make our food. That is the idea. Life will be sublime. Manmana bhava mad bhakto mad yaji. That is the real business. And such a person, master of self, becomes master of self, even if living simply. Bhagavan commented on how many people spend so much money on entertainment like movies, but he said no one is becoming enlivened by it. Right? As soon as it's over, you're bored again, next entertainment. This is another artificial agitation of the mind. There is no practical benefit. Pointing to a vase, he said, just see how many varieties of flowers, colorful. Can they make such colorful? He speaks on behalf of the scientists then. Yes, we're trying to overcome nature, right? But we can't even make a flower. Wait millions of years, because that's how long it's probably going to take if it happens. And what about now? Now you sleep. Now you'll be in ignorance, essentially. Right? So using Krishna's ingredients, Krishna supplying the intelligence, scientists are making so many things which they want credit for, but then Krishna's creations, beautiful creations like a flower, they say that it's come about by chance, Prabhupada says. It's come about by chance. So then Prabhupada says, laughing, so beat them with shoes. And when they protest, then say, oh, it is chance. Don't mind, it is by chance that I'm beating you. And what's interesting is that one of the devotees mentioned that a new family joined, and the man is a plumber and a carpenter. And Srila Prabhupada was actually very happy to hear that. He saw there was great use for these practical skills rather than scientists making promises that's never going to happen. Bhagavan explained that despite it being the hottest summer in 100 years with many farms in the area drought affected, New Mayapur had water for crops from an underground supply, and they harvested 5 tons of barley. So proving that the devotees who are focusing on serving the Supreme Lord are getting all their necessities supplied. Although too coarse for chapatis, Prabhupada had another use, right, for this barley. He said, you smash that and boil with milk, don't put sugar, then I shall put sugar according to my taste. So in this simple exchange, Prabhupada is demonstrating that we're serving Krishna, he's supplying the necessities, and with the intelligence he gives us, we can utilize it. Right? Maybe the barley can't be used for chapatis, but now Srila Prabhupada's going to have it in some kind of porridge. And that's how we become open to the Lord's guidance from within. Right? Dadami buddhi yogam tam. When we surrender to him. Then he knows we put aside our own ideas of how to do things, and we really want to understand how he wants us to do things. Then he gives us the direction. And Bhagavan then says that they had been performing Sankirtan, book distribution and house programs, and in return they'd been getting enough donations and support for everything that they needed to do, including printing Krishna book while Srila Prabhupada is there. Another example of how when you engage, particularly in Sankirtan, which is so dear to Lord Chaitanya and Srila Prabhupada, putting out these books which are going to change the world, which are changing the world. This is when Krishna will supply us with all necessities. Okay. So this is the end of this very nice chapter. Srila Prabhupada ki. Are there any questions or comments? Any corrections? Okay. If there's none, we are going to glorify a devotee of the Lord who left his body recently. So His Grace Mukunda Prabhu, he's very well known to devotees in this yatra. He was one of the first disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Maharaj. He's the father of His Grace Sriram Prabhu, who is a senior disciple of Srila Parthasarathi Das Goswami Maharaj, as well as a personal assistant to Maharaj. And Mukunda Prabhu was also the father of Nanda Nandini and Nimai. He served in so many different capacities at the temple for, I think, over 4 decades, very much involved in services, as well as he was an Amahata leader in the South Coast. So Mukunda Prabhu and Lalita Kund Prabhu, his wife, they rendered tremendous service to Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON since the pioneering days for 50 years. They also spent 6 months annually at Sri Vrindavan Dham engaged in Dham Seva, and we know that all auspiciousness will certainly accompany him in his journey to Shri Shri Radhanath in Goloka Vrindavan. His Grace Mukunda Prabhu ki. So we'll listen to some messages of appreciation for Prabhu.
Dear Mukunda Prabhu, please accept my blessings. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So this morning, you left this world early this morning, with Srila Prabhupada chanting there. And I have lost a very good friend, a very dedicated disciple, and a very sincere follower of Srila Prabhupada and very sincere member of Srila Prabhupada's International Society for Krishna Consciousness. I remember when I first met you down in Amkamas many years ago, and you were a cheerful devotee, a devotee who appreciated Krishna consciousness very much, a devotee who was happy practicing Krishna consciousness, happy to chant Hare Krishna and happy to see Krishna consciousness spread. As time went on, we got to know each other better, and then it was actually in December 1990, means 35 years ago, slightly more, that I initiated you with the blessings of Srila Prabhupada, and of course with your good wife Lalita Kun Devi Dasi. And you were amongst the first very small group of devotees who I gave initiation to at that time, during the time of the Rath Yatra at the end of December 1990. So from that time on, and before that time too, we would visit you there in Amkamas, and from time to time we'd go down the south coast and participate in preaching programs, namahatas, and even we did some tent campaigns. So we did like that together as a team. And I just appreciated so much your spirit, your warmth as a human being, and your warmth as a devotee. So now somehow or other, by Krishna's arrangement, well, sooner or later everybody's time comes. That's the law of this material world. But through the years, through all those years, from 35 years ago up until just the very immediate past, we always, I would say, enjoyed a wonderful relationship of service and engagement in Srila Prabhupada's movement. Like I said, we would visit you in Amkamas while you were there. Then you moved, you were in Durban for some time. I would visit you down there in the Malvern area, and more recently in Johannesburg or Centurion area. We would meet you, we would visit you often in Vrindavan. What a nice experience that was. We arrived sometime in the morning in Delhi, feeling fatigued, and it's just not very easy traveling like that. And then we'd have to travel further, drive down to Vrindavan, some hours driving. But then we would visit you in your apartment in Vrindavan and be able to take a bath, change our clothes, and particularly have some just absolutely excellent prasadam. In this way, in a sense, you practically save our lives. So, what can I do? What can I say other than thank you? Thank you for your association. Thank you for the service you have rendered. Thank you for your example of being a dedicated, committed, and very serious practicing devotee, follower of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for all these things. Hopefully in the future we will meet again. This is what Srila Prabhupada said. There'll be another ISKCON in the spiritual world. So, regarding Lalita Kund, your very good wife who's now left behind, well, Lalita Kund, please just carry on in your Krishna consciousness. Render service, keep chanting seriously and attentively. And your children Sri Dam, Radhanandani, and Nimai, you also please continue on in your lives in Krishna consciousness. And by Prabhupada's grace and by Mukunda Prabhu's grace, you'll all continue making progress in Krishna consciousness. As for me, Mukunda Prabhu, I miss you very much, but I'm praying to Krishna that before too long we will meet up again and we'll be able to recognize each other and enjoy having such a wonderful relationship as we always did for all these years. Hare Krishna, His Grace Mukunda Prabhu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna.
From Partha Sarati Das Goswami, and I have just been informed by his eldest son and my own personal secretary and assistant, Sridharma Prabhu, that his beloved father left his body this morning at 3:50. Mukunda Prabhu has left his body. So I first met Mukunda Prabhu and his brother Rameshwara and Lalita Kund and the rest of the family, Radhanandini, Nimai. When the temple opened in 1985, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Temple. Consequently, I would regularly visit their house in Unkamos. At that time, Mukunda Prabhu was teaching. And he would invite senior devotees to the house, and we would all take very nice prasadam. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, Bhakti Chu Maharaj, Giraj Maharaj, Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, who later became his spiritual master, Shrutikiti Prabhu, Shamal Prabhu. We would all look forward to visiting Unkamas, Craigieburn, and take prasad. I think it was in the garage, nicely fitted out. So this has come somewhat as a shock. He was 77, 78. But his departure was quite swift. He had a heart attack, then the various organs were damaged, the kidney, I think, in particular. So we all have to leave our bodies. Everyone sitting here, everyone listening to this, and myself included, we will have to leave our material mortal bodies. The body breaks down, just like a machine, just like a car breaks down. It's planned to break down, actually. Our bodies have a shelf life, just like a computer. They plan it to break down, so you have to buy another one. And then the industry continues. So, 70 years and 10, the Bible says that's 70. Some people live to 100, but then the body becomes quite miserable. So Mukunda Prabhu left his body peacefully, listening to Srila Prabhupada chanting japa. Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, is the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and he brought the Hare Krishna movement to the West, to South Africa, to Europe, to Russia, etc. So Mukunda Prabhu is a bona fide grand disciple of Srila Prabhupada and a disciple, direct disciple of His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj, and very much admired and a very popular devotee, very humble, very nice. And recently, in the last 15 or 20 years, he'd been spending a lot of time in Vrindavan, just chanting the Lord's holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is glorious. Towards the end of one's life, especially over 50, one should immerse oneself in the chanting of the name of God, reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhakti Sastra. So Mukunda Prabhu, along with his dear wife, Lalita, he was doing this, often spending 6 months, 7 months in a flat that he had there in Vrindavan. So this is very wonderful. So I have no doubt that Mukunda Prabhu will now be transferred into Krishna's pastimes somewhere in this material world, where he will continue his spiritual life, associate with Nityasiddha associates of Krishna, Krishna Parikas, and serve Lord Krishna and serve Radha and Krishna. I have no doubt. So how should we understand this? We have to understand from the absolute consideration, one is not the body, we are the soul. And this is described very clearly in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text 10 to text 30. So I encourage the Vaishnavas to please read these verses, and especially the family of Mukunda Prabhu. And of course, his eldest son, Sridhama Prabhu, will take some dust and do the final rites in Vrindavan on the bank of the Jamuna. So I pray that all the family members can become strong in this turbulent, difficult time, and that all of us, going through our various challenges of health, instability, can take shelter of the holy name of the Lord, which is actually the only medicine. And Lord Chaitanya, Lord Krishna, he did a great favor, a great blessing to Mukunda Prabhu, giving him such nice children who are all Vaishnavas, and even his grandchildren. And rather than drag on to older age, where the body really gives you many types of misery, aches and pains, and this is an appropriate age, 78, for a devotee Vaishnava to leave their body. So it's a time of rejoicement because he's now joined in Lord Krishna's pastimes, and of course it is a time of sympathy because we've lost the association. Temporarily, we have lost the association of a very wonderful Vaishnav, His Grace Mukunda Prabhu. His Grace Mukunda Prabhu, Ki Jai, His Holiness Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj Ki Jai, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.